I still remember the day I discovered my wife's betrayal as if it were etched in my mind, the details as sharp as the pain it inflicted. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that often fades into the background of life's routine. I had just come home from work, the sun still lingering in the sky, casting a warm glow through our living room window. The smell of her perfume lingered in the air, but something felt off that day. I stepped into our bedroom and there it was, the unmistakable sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. It was strange. She usually kept it on silent while we were together. I picked it up, intending to silence it when a message preview caught my eye. It was from her boss, a name I had come to know all too well over the years. The words were casual, but the context was alarming. "Can't wait to see you tonight, just us like before." My heart dropped. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead, and my stomach churned. I had long suspected something was off between them, but I had brushed it aside. As paranoia, I felt like I was in a bad dream, one where I couldn't wake up. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall to scream, but instead I stood frozen, my mind racing through a whirlwind of emotions: confusion, anger, disbelief. When she walked in a few minutes later, I confronted her. "What's going on with you and your boss?" I asked, my voice steady but laced with an edge I didn't know I had. Her face went pale, and for a moment I saw a flicker of guilt cross her features before she masked it with a defensive facade. "What are you talking about?" she replied, her tone sharp. I held up the phone, my hands trembling slightly. What do you mean, just us?" Her expression shifted from surprise to anger. "You're invading my privacy. That's not what you think." The denial felt like a slap in the face. I had hoped for honesty, for her to come clean, but instead, she was digging herself deeper into the hole I couldn't believe she had created. "So, you're saying this isn't what it looks like, that you haven't been having an affair?" Hesitated, and in that moment I knew the truth. "It's not what you think," she repeated, but her voice lacked conviction. My heart shattered. I felt a mix of anger and sorrow wash over me. The memories of our wedding day, the laughter we shared, the dreams we built together, all of it felt tarnished in an instant. I had trusted her implicitly, and now that trust was crumbling like a fragile house of cards. "Just tell me the truth," I pleaded, my voice cracking. "Have you been cheating on me?" Her silence spoke volumes. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Instead, the betrayal stung deeper, igniting a fire within me I had never known. I turned away, unable to look at her any longer. "I can't believe you would do this to me." As I walked out of the room, I could feel the weight of our life together crashing down on me. I had to get out to breathe. I stumbled into the living room, my mind racing. I had loved her, had given her everything, and now it felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, ready to fall into a dark abyss. The emotional turmoil was overwhelming. I felt like a puppet with its strings cut, lost, adrift. I didn't know what to do next. Was I supposed to confront her again, demand answers, or was it better to let the anger simmer before I decided my next move? I paced the living room, my thoughts spiraling. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I also felt a strange calmness settle in. I had always been the rational one, the one who preferred to think things through, but this was different. This was personal. This was betrayal at its deepest level. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized I had to make a choice. I could either let this moment define me or find a way to regain control. But how? In the days following that devastating confrontation, I found myself spiraling into an emotional void. The betrayal consumed me, gnawing at my insides like a ravenous beast. I couldn't concentrate at work. Every conversation felt like a chore, every task an insurmountable hurdle. My colleagues noticed my distraction, but I brushed off their concerns with a curt smile and vague excuses. Inside, I was drowning in a sea of anger, sadness, and confusion. Nights were the worst. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment I discovered her betrayal over and over in my mind. Each time it felt like a fresh wound, the pain as sharp as the first moment I saw that text. I thought about the life we had built together, the little moments of joy, the shared dreams, the laughter. Each memory felt tainted, a reminder of the trust that had been shattered. I couldn't understand how she could do this to me. We had a good life, or so I thought. We had plans for the future, talks about starting a family, and now it all seemed like a cruel joke. I had been vulnerable with her, opened my heart, and she had taken that trust and stomped on it. The anger bubbled within me, a molten core threatening to erupt. I found myself constantly checking her social media, looking for clues, for evidence of her affair. It was a sick obsession, but I couldn't help it. Each picture of her smiling with colleagues felt like a dagger in my heart. I wanted to scream at her to make her feel the pain she had inflicted on me, but I also felt paralyzed. What good would it do? I was stuck in this cycle of anger and grief, unable to see a way out. Then one day, as I sat at my desk, the idea hit me like a lightning bolt. I had access to her work emails and files, a privilege I had never thought to misuse. I had always trusted her completely, but now I saw this as a way to reclaim some power. I could expose her. I could show everyone what she had done. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a mix of exhilaration and dread. I knew it was drastic, that it would have consequences not just for her but for me as well. But the idea of her getting away with this, of her living a normal life while I was left to pick up the pieces, ignited a fire in me. It felt like the only way to regain control over my life and the situation. I spent the next few days wrestling with my conscience. I thought about the potential. Fallout: would she lose her job? Would she be ostracized by our friends? The thought of her suffering almost felt like a balm for my own pain, a twisted sense of justice. But then I would remember the good times, the woman I had married, the love we had shared. I felt like I was being pulled in two directions, each side fighting for dominance. I confided in my best friend, Mark, who had always been my sounding board. I didn't tell him the full extent of my plan, but I expressed my anger and hurt. "I just don't understand how she could do this to me," I said, my voice cracking. "I feel like I don't even know her anymore." Mark listened patiently, nodding. "People can surprise you, man. It's messed up, but maybe it's time to think about what you want. You can't let her control your life like this." His words resonated with me, and I began to see the clarity in my turmoil. I had a choice to make. I could either let this consume me or take action. I decided to take control, to make her face the consequences of her actions. That night, after a long day of deliberation, I sat down at my computer, heart racing. I opened her email account, my fingers trembling as I typed in her password, something I had known for years. The screen lit up, and I felt a mix of adrenaline and dread course through me. I was crossing a line, but I had to see it through. I began to sift through her messages, looking for anything that could serve as evidence. My heart pounded as I read exchanges between her and her boss, filled with flirtation and innuendo. Each message felt like a punch to the gut, confirming the betrayal I had tried to deny. I found emails discussing meetings that didn't exist, late-night work sessions that were just a cover for their secret rendezvous. It was all there, laid bare before me, and I felt a sick sense of satisfaction wash over me. I could use this. I could expose her for who she really was. As I compiled the evidence, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. I was angry, yes, but there was also a sense of empowerment. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control of my narrative. I was ready to unleash my revenge, to make sure she faced the consequences of her actions. But even as I prepared to act, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered doubts. Was this really who I wanted to be? The days that followed were a blur of anxiety and anticipation. I had everything I needed to expose my wife. And yet, even as I sat on the precipice of revenge, I couldn't shake the unease that gnawed at me. The thrill of having regained some power over my life was intoxicating, but it was also laced with moral ambiguity. I was about to ruin her career, her reputation, and in doing so, I feared I might lose a piece of myself. I spent my evenings meticulously crafting an email to HR. I wanted to ensure that I presented the evidence clearly and convincingly. I included screenshots of the messages, timestamps, and even details about the meetings that had been little more than intimate encounters. I pored over every word, wanting to strike the right balance between anger and professionalism. It felt surreal, like I was writing a script for someone else's life, but it was, in fact, my wife's life I was about to dismantle. As I typed, I couldn't help but reflect on our relationship. We had built a life together, and now I was preparing to destroy it. Every laugh we shared, every whispered promise felt like a lie. The memories of our wedding day, when I had looked into her eyes and vowed to love her forever, were now tainted with the knowledge of her betrayal. I felt sick, but the anger pushed me forward. I told myself I was doing this for me. I was reclaiming my dignity, my self-respect. I couldn't allow her to walk away unscathed while I was left to pick up the pieces. I needed her to feel the pain I was feeling, the devastation that came with betrayal. It was a twisted sense of justice, but it felt justified in my gut. Finally, the moment came when I hit send. The email disappeared into the digital ether, and in that instant I felt both a rush of relief and a wave of dread. I had crossed a line, and there was no turning back. My heart raced as I contemplated the consequences. Would she be fired? Would she retaliate? Would our friends and family take her side? The next day was agonizing. I barely made it through work, my mind racing with thoughts of her reaction. I imagined her reading the email, her face going pale, the realization of her actions crashing down on her like a ton of bricks. I pictured her storming into my office, accusations flying, but I steeled myself against the potential fallout. I had made my choice, and now I had to face whatever came next. When I finally returned home, the atmosphere was thick with tension. She was there, sitting at the dining table, her face a mix of confusion and anxiety. I could see it in her eyes. She knew something was off. "Hey," she said cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. As I walked past her, I could feel the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. My heart raced, torn between wanting to confront her and the desire to avoid the inevitable explosion. But I knew this moment was coming. The truth was out, and it was only a matter of time before she found out I was the one who had pulled the trigger. Then the phone rang. It was her boss. I watched her face drain of color as she answered, her voice trembling. I could hear snippets of the conversation, questions about her conduct, accusations of misconduct. I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and guilt as I realized the consequences of my actions were unfolding in real time. After she hung up, she turned to me, her expression a mixture of fury and desperation. "What did you do?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation. "I told HR everything," I said, my voice steady. "They needed to know the truth." Her face twisted in disbelief. "You had no right, you ruined everything, you're going to regret this." "Regret?" I echoed, anger bubbling to the surface. "Regret is what I feel every time I think about what you did to me. You think I wanted to do this. You forced my hand." She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor, her eyes blazing. "I can't believe you would go this far. You're a coward." "Coward? I'm the one who stood by you while you betrayed me. You're the one who should be ashamed." Her tears began to fall, but I felt no sympathy. "You don't get to play the victim here. You made your choice. Now you have to face the consequences." The argument escalated, words flying like daggers, each accusation cutting deeper than the last. I watched as the reality of her situation began to sink in, the color draining from her face as she realized the gravity of what was happening. As she stormed out of the room, I felt a hollow victory wash over me. I had taken a stand, but at what cost? I had unleashed chaos, and I knew I wasn't finished yet. I still had to navigate the fallout, the reactions of friends and family, and the emotional wreckage left behind. In the days that followed, I prepared for the storm. I knew I would have to answer questions, defend my actions to those who might not understand. I felt a weight settling on my shoulders, a burden that would follow me into the unknown. But deep down, I was ready for whatever came next. I had taken control of my narrative, and now I had to see it through to the end. The days after I sent that email felt like a slow-motion train wreck. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, anger, guilt, and a twisted sense of satisfaction. I had set the wheels of revenge in motion, and now I was left to grapple with the consequences. Her reaction was immediate and explosive. She didn't come home that night. I tried to sleep, but the silence in the house was deafening. I tossed and turned, replaying our argument in my mind, the words we had exchanged echoing like a haunting refrain. I wondered if I had gone too far. I had sought to reclaim my power, but what I had unleashed felt like a monster I could no longer control. The next day I received a text from Mark. Heard about the drama at work. You okay? I hesitated before responding, unsure of how to articulate what I was feeling. Not really. I'm just trying to process everything. He replied quickly, want to grab a drink later? We can talk. I agreed, needing to escape the suffocating atmosphere of my home. When I met Mark at our usual bar, he could see the turmoil etched on my face. You look like you've seen a ghost, he said, sliding a drink across the table. I feel like one, I replied, taking a long sip. The alcohol burned my throat but provided a momentary escape. So what's the aftermath? Mark asked, leaning in, his expression serious. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. She's been called into HR. I think they're going to fire her. Mark's eyes widened. Damn, man, that's heavy. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I felt a wave of anger rise within me. She cheated on me, Mark. She shattered our marriage. She deserves to face the consequences. But is ruining her career the answer? He pressed. What about your own conscience? This isn't just about her. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been so focused on my hurt that I hadn't fully considered the broader implications of my actions. I don't know, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. I just wanted to make her feel something, anything. Mark nodded, his expression softening. I get it, but revenge can be a slippery slope. You're playing with fire. I stared into my drink, the ice clinking against the glass as I contemplated his words. I had thought of this as a way to reclaim my dignity, but now it felt like a descent into darkness. The satisfaction I had felt when I hit send was fading, replaced by an unsettling sense of dread. That night, I returned home to find my wife sitting at the dining table, her face buried in her hands. She looked defeated, the fire that had once burned so brightly in her eyes replaced by a dull, vacant stare. I can't believe you did this, she said, her voice muffled. You've ruined my life. I stood in the doorway, my heart racing. You did that to yourself, not me. You made your choices. She looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. I know I messed up, but this isn't just about me. It's about us. You've destroyed everything we built together. The weight of her words hit me hard. I had been so consumed by my anger that I hadn't fully grasped the magnitude of what I was doing. I didn't want to destroy our lives, but you left me no choice. I was wrong, she admitted, her voice trembling. But this isn't the solution. You're going to regret this. I wanted to argue to defend my actions, but the truth was I was beginning to question myself. Had I crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed? I had sought revenge, but at what cost? The next day I received a call from HR. They wanted to discuss the situation further. My heart raced as I walked into the office, the weight of my actions pressing down on me. When I arrived, I was greeted by the HR manager, a stern woman with a no-nonsense demeanor. Thank you for coming in, she said, her expression unreadable. We need to talk about the allegations you brought forward. I nodded, my throat dry. I just wanted to bring the truth to light. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. I understand your concerns, but you need to realize the gravity of what you've done. This could impact not just your wife, but also the company. I swallowed hard the reality of my actions crashing down around me. I know, I felt like I had to do something. Revenge rarely leads to a satisfying outcome, she said, her voice softening slightly. Have you considered what this means for your future, both personally and professionally? Her words echoed in my mind as I left the office. I had thought I was taking control, but now I felt like I was spiraling out of control. I had unleashed chaos into my life, and I didn't know how to find my way back. As I returned home, I found my wife packing her things. I can't stay here, she said, her voice hollow. I can't face anyone after this. I felt a pang of regret, but I quickly suppressed it. You made your choices, you knew the risks. I never wanted it to come to this, she said, her voice breaking. I thought we could work through it. Work through what? I shot back, frustration boiling over. You betrayed me, you shattered our trust. We stood there, two broken people facing the wreckage of our relationship. I had sought revenge, but now I was left with nothing but emptiness. I had wanted her to feel the pain I felt, but all I could see was the destruction we had both wrought. As she walked out the door, I felt a part of myself leave with her. The reality of what I had done settled in, a heavy weight on my chest. I had taken my revenge, but the victory felt hollow. I was left to confront the aftermath of my choices, the wreckage of our life together, and the haunting realization that I had become the very thing I despised. The silence that enveloped the house after she left was suffocating. I stood in the doorway, watching her walk away, each step echoing in my mind like a death knell for our marriage. I had sought revenge, and in doing so I had lost everything. The house felt empty, a shell of what it once was, filled with memories that now felt like ghosts haunting the rooms. In the days that followed, I was consumed by a profound sense of loss and regret. I had envisioned a sense of satisfaction in exposing her, but what I felt instead was a gnawing emptiness. I had taken action to reclaim my dignity, but all I had accomplished was the destruction of the woman I once loved. My mind was a battlefield, torn between anger and sorrow. I threw myself into work, hoping to drown out the chaos within. I focused on tasks, deadlines, and meetings, but the distraction was fleeting. My colleagues noticed my change in demeanor, but I brushed off their concerns with a forced smile. Inside, I was a storm of conflicting emotions, battling the fallout of my choices. Mark continued to check in on me, offering support and a listening ear. One evening, he invited me over for dinner. "You need to talk about this, man," he said, concern etched on his face. "You can't keep bottling it up." I nodded, knowing he was right but feeling reluctant to delve into the depths of my emotions. "I just don't know how to process it all," I admitted, my voice heavy. I wanted her to feel the pain I felt, but now I just feel empty. "Revenge can be a double-edged sword," he said. "You might get the satisfaction of seeing her hurt, but it doesn't heal your own wounds." I stared into my drink, contemplating his words. I thought I would feel justified, that I'd reclaim my power, but instead I feel like I've lost a part of myself. Mark leaned forward, his expression earnest. "It's okay to feel that way. You're grieving the loss of your marriage, your trust, and the person you thought she was. It's going to take time to work through this." I appreciated his support, but the reality of my situation weighed heavily on me. I had acted in a moment of rage, and now I was left with the consequences. My wife had lost her job, her reputation, and perhaps even her friends. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed an unforgivable line. As the days turned into weeks, I began to notice the impact of my actions on those around me. Friends who had once been supportive were now hesitant to engage in conversation about the situation. I could feel the tension in the air, the unspoken judgment that lingered like a dark cloud. I had become the villain in my own story, and the isolation was suffocating. I received a few messages from mutual friends expressing concern for both of us. Some reached out to check on me, while others were more aligned with her, showing sympathy for her plight. Each message felt like a reminder of my failure, a testament to the life I had destroyed. I was stuck in this limbo, unable to reconcile my actions with the person I wanted to be. One night, I found myself scrolling through social media, searching for glimpses of her life post-revelation. I came across a post from her boss, a vague update about restructuring within the company. I felt a surge of anger, but it quickly morphed into guilt. I had been the catalyst for this upheaval, and I couldn't escape the reality of it. Days turned into a blur, and I began to feel like a ghost in my own life. I was going through the motions, but my heart wasn't in it. I had lost not just my wife, but also the sense of self that had been intertwined with her. I had become defined by my anger and my need for revenge, and I didn't recognize the person I had become. One evening, I sat alone in the living room, the weight of solitude pressing down on me. I picked up my phone and dialed Mark's number. "I need to talk," I said when he answered, my voice cracking. "Of course, man, want to meet up?" "Yeah, I think I need to get out of here." When we met, I poured out my feelings, the confusion, the regret, and the anger that still simmered beneath the surface. "I thought I would feel empowered after everything, but I just feel lost," I admitted. Mark listened intently, nodding. "It's a complicated situation, and it's okay to feel conflicted. You made a choice in a moment of pain, and now you're dealing with the fallout. It's not easy." "I don't want to be that person," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to be defined by revenge." "You're not," he reassured me. "You're a good person who was hurt deeply. This doesn't have to define your future. You can choose to learn from this." His words resonated with me, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could choose how I moved forward. I needed to confront my pain, face my regrets, and ultimately find a way to heal. As I left the bar that night, I felt a sense of clarity beginning to emerge from the chaos. I had made mistakes, but I was ready to take responsibility for my actions. I needed to reflect on what had happened, not just to my wife but to myself. In the following days, I began to explore the idea of forgiveness, not just for her, but for myself as well. I recognized that I had to let go of the anger that had consumed me. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a necessary step toward healing. I started writing in a journal, pouring my thoughts onto the page. I reflected on my relationship, my expectations, and the lessons I had learned through this painful experience. I began to see my wife not just as the person who betrayed me, but as a flawed human being who had made mistakes, just like I had. It was a long road ahead, but I was determined to reclaim my life, to move forward with intention and grace. I knew I would have to face the consequences of my actions, but I also understood that I had the power to choose how I responded. As I looked toward the future, I realized that I could become stronger from this experience, that I could rebuild my life on a foundation of understanding and forgiveness. It was time to embrace the journey ahead, to let go of the past, and to finally begin healing. As I embarked on this journey of healing, I felt a sense of resolve settling in. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but the first step was acknowledging the pain and regret that had consumed me for far too long. I had let anger dictate my actions, but now I was ready to reclaim my life on my own terms, free from the shackles of revenge. The first thing I did was reach out to my wife. I knew it was a risk, but I felt it was necessary to confront the aftermath of our shattered relationship. I sent her a message, asking if she would be willing to meet. To my surprise, she agreed. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe, a neutral ground where we could talk without the weight of our past looming over us. When I saw her that day, my heart ached at the sight of her. She looked different, vulnerable, fragile, and yet somehow still the woman I had loved. We sat across from each other, the tension thick in the air. I could see the hurt in her eyes, a reflection of my own pain. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice trembling. "I never wanted it to come to this." "I know," I replied, my voice steady but filled with emotion. "I've spent so much time consumed by anger and revenge, but I realize now that it didn't help either of us." Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "I made a terrible mistake, and I'm sorry for how it affected you. I never intended for it to spiral out of control." We spent the next hour talking, sharing our feelings and the consequences of our actions. I could feel the weight of the past begin to lift as we acknowledged the hurt we had caused each other. It was a painful conversation, but it was also cathartic. We were no longer just victims of betrayal, we were two people trying to make sense of what had happened. As we spoke, I began to see her not just as the woman who had betrayed me, but as a person who had made a grave mistake. I realized that holding onto my anger was only prolonging my suffering. I needed to let go, not for her sake, but for my own. "I don't know what the future holds for us," I said, my voice softening. "But I want to move forward with understanding. I don't want to be defined by this pain." "I feel the same way," she replied, her voice breaking. "I want to learn from this, to grow. I never wanted to hurt you." We ended our meeting with a tentative sense of closure. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a step toward healing. I left the cafe with a sense of lightness, the burden of anger beginning to lift. I knew it would take time to fully forgive her, and even longer to forgive myself, but I was committed to the process. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started going to therapy, seeking guidance on how to navigate my feelings of betrayal and heartbreak. It was a challenging journey, but with each session, I began to understand the complexities of love, trust, and forgiveness. I also began to reconnect with friends and family, allowing myself to be vulnerable and share what I had been through. Their support was invaluable, helping me to see that I wasn't alone in this struggle. I realized that many people had faced betrayal in their lives, and hearing their stories helped me to feel less isolated. As I moved forward, I made a conscious effort to cultivate self-love and compassion. I took up new hobbies, focused on my health, and redefined my goals. I started running, finding solace in the rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement. Each run became a metaphor for my journey, sometimes difficult but always forward-moving. Months passed and I began to notice a shift within myself. I was no longer the angry man consumed by revenge. I was a person who had faced the darkness and was choosing to step into the light. I had learned valuable lessons about trust, love, and the importance of communication. I still thought about my wife and the life we had shared, but the pain no longer felt insurmountable. I could remember the good times without being overshadowed by the betrayal. I realized that while our relationship had changed, it didn't have to define my future. Eventually, I reached out to her again. We met for coffee and the conversation was different this time, lighter, filled with tentative hope. We spoke about our lives, our growth, and the lessons we had learned. It was clear that we were both on separate paths, but the animosity had faded, replaced by a sense of understanding. "I hope you find happiness," I told her sincerely. "And I hope you do too," she replied, her smile genuine. As we parted ways, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had come full circle from betrayal to revenge, and finally to understanding and forgiveness. I had learned that while the scars of betrayal would always remain, they didn't have to dictate my future. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, to open my heart to new possibilities and experiences. I had emerged from the darkness, stronger and more resilient than ever. In the end, I realized that the journey of healing is not linear. It's a winding path filled with ups and downs. But as long as I was willing to confront my pain and choose growth, I could create a life filled with hope and love. As I stepped into my future, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to live authentically, to love deeply, and to embrace the beauty of life, no matter where it led me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.